Joe Elliott, the man with the rugged face of industrial England and the voice that once made millions scream in blazing stadiums, was never the kind of legend people loved. He wasn't a prodigy born to shine, nor a self-destructive rebel like many rockers of his era. What set Joe Elliott apart was his ability to survive, not just through time, but through the storms of career, loss, and judgment. In a world where legendary bands crumbled one by one to addiction, betrayal, or death, Def Leppard endured for more than 40 years. And at its heart was always Joe Elliott. He wasn't merely the lead singer. He was the soul keeper of the band. Joe didn't sing to be adored. He sang because it was the only way to stay alive. From a Sheffield boy sketching imaginary band logos in his bedroom to the steadfast frontman who kept Def Leppard from falling apart, Joe Elliott's journey proves that rock is not just noise, it's loyalty, willpower, and faith. The story of a man who simply refused to break. But before he became the frontman who could sing amid the ruins and still make the world listen, Joe Elliott was just a Sheffield boy with an old wooden guitar and dreams blurred by factory smoke. Joe Elliott was born on August 1st, 1959 in Sheffield, England's Steel City, where the hiss of compressors and the smell of coal were the heartbeat of working-class life. In that harsh landscape, young Joe grew up in the Crooks district, in a small house among rows of gray streets, with his parents and hardworking neighbors. His mother, Cynthia, was the first to notice that her son possessed something different. She taught him to sing, to feel music, and placed his first guitar in his hands. No one could have known that in that simple act, she saved the soul of a boy who might otherwise have been swallowed by Sheffield's ordinary grind. Music didn't come to Joe as a distant dream, but as a beam of light cutting through the fog of steel dust. On rainy afternoons, as the smoke from the furnaces blanketed the streets, Joe would sit in the small kitchen listening to the radio, to T-Rex, Queen, or David Bowie. And for the first time, he felt that something was calling his name. From then on, he began writing his first songs, clumsy, naive, but burning with desire, about the rain, the city, and the belief that life could not be confined to a single road. At King Edward VII School, Joe was a quiet student, but his mind was full of sound. When he met Rick Savage, a neighbor equally obsessed with the guitar, they clicked instantly, as if destiny had drawn them together. Two boys growing up among soot-stained brick walls, both believing music was the only escape. Each night, when the whole neighborhood slept, the yellow light from their small garage stayed on, and the echo of guitars drifted through the air. A silent declaration. We will not live the life others have planned for us. No one in Crooks believed those two kids would go far, but that disbelief became their fuel. Joe didn't sing to dream. He sang as if fighting for his own survival, and from that damp, narrow room, the dream of Def Leppard was born. Quiet, awkward, but fiercely alive. Though Joe has always spoken humbly of his childhood, he once admitted it was a good, normal, peaceful time, a kind of calm that shaped his survivor's spirit. That humble foundation kept him grounded when fame arrived and taught him to bow his head in gratitude, even when he had to sing among the ruins. Joe Elliott's destiny began with a moment that seemed meaningless. One afternoon in 1977, he missed the bus home. Deciding to walk, Joe happened to meet Pete Willis, a young guitarist from a local band called Atomic Mass. They talked for a few minutes, and Joe mentioned an idea for a band name he'd once doodled in his school notebook: Def Leppard. Willis liked the name and invited Joe to a rehearsal. No one knew that this random encounter would go on to shape the entire history of Def Leppard. At that first rehearsal, Joe picked up a guitar but wasn't particularly impressive. Then someone handed him a microphone and asked him to sing "Suffragette City" by David Bowie. And everything changed. His voice, still raw and unpolished, carried the fire of someone who had never known fear. From that day on, Atomic Mass had a new leader, and Joe had something he would never let go of again: the microphone. Soon after, Joe renamed the band Def Leppard, intentionally misspelling it to look more modern and unique. While punk was taking over Britain with its anarchic spirit, Joe chose the opposite path, not to destroy, but to build. He wanted to create rock that didn't just shake up bars, but could make entire stadiums sing along. It was a bold, almost insane vision for a group of broke, managerless kids from Sheffield with no real future. From 1977 to 1979, Def Leppard lived literally in the shadows. They rehearsed in a freezing old warehouse with cracked walls and wires held together by tape. But it was there that their earliest songs took shape, rough, fiery, and brimming with the energy of a new kind of rock. Getcha Rocks Off, Overture, Ride into the Sun. They self-financed their first EP with whatever money they had and mailed it to every radio station they could find. When BBC legend John Peel unexpectedly played Getcha Rocks Off on air, the band could hardly believe it. It was the first time they'd heard their own music broadcast nationwide. For Joe, that moment felt like hearing his 8-year-old dream come alive through the radio. In 1980, Def Leppard signed with Vertigo Records and released their debut album On Through the Night. It wasn't perfect, but it pulsed with youthful energy and the hunger to break out of England's borders. When critics accused them of selling out to America for sounding too clean and accessible, Joe never wavered. He believed rock had no borders. There were only two kinds, alive or dead, and he wanted Def Leppard to live for a long, long time. Their early tours with AC/DC, Scorpions, and Judas Priest forged them into true road warriors. Every night, Joe stood before thousands of strangers, terrified yet thrilled, learning how to command a crowd with nothing but his voice and sheer will. They slept in vans, ate cold food, and played in ramshackle venues. But those years hardened Def Leppard into something rare, a band bound by endurance and loyalty. Joe wasn't just the singer, he was the visionary, the one who forced everyone to dream bigger, and the first to understand that reaching glory meant enduring loneliness. Under the flickering lights of small stages, Joe Elliott began his rise to becoming an icon, not of rebellion, but of resilience. The stadium rock dream he once sketched in a school notebook was slowly becoming real. By the time their UK tour ended, Def Leppard were no longer a garage band. They carried the fire of a new generation, urgent, explosive, and part of the rising new wave of British heavy metal movement in the early 1980s. At the center of that storm, Joe Elliott and Def Leppard reached their defining moment, their debut album On Through the Night, 1980. It wasn't just a record, it was a declaration from a group of young dreamers, proving that Britain still had kids brave enough to believe. Hello, America, with its open road spirit and cinematic optimism, revealed Joe's unique vision, rock not just for Sheffield's working class, but for the whole world. Though some at home mocked them for being too American, the album sold well and put Def Leppard on the international map. Joe understood that criticism was simply the price of dreaming beyond England's gray skies. A year later, he proved that instinct right. When Def Leppard teamed up with producer Mutt Lange for High and Dry, 1981, their music ascended to a new level, sharper, sleeker, irresistibly powerful. Lang wasn't just an engineer, he was an architect who taught Joe how to turn raw grit into harmony, how to transform the roar of industrial England into melodies sweet enough for radio, yet heavy enough for metal. Bringing on the Heartbreak. Their first great rock ballad, Why, was both fierce and sorrowful, marking the first time MTV truly paid attention to a band from Sheffield. It was the birth of pop metal, a sound countless others would imitate but never truly capture. Yet just when the ship seemed steady, cracks began to show from within. During the recording of their third album, Pyromania, 1982, alcohol and pressure crept into the studio. Pete Willis, the founding guitarist and Joe's closest friend, started to lose control. Every session became a gamble. Either he was drunk or disappeared entirely. When he failed to record his guitar parts for stage fright, everything came to a halt. Mutt Lange, a perfectionist, finally said he couldn't go on like that. Joe faced the hardest choice of his life: keep the friend who helped him start it all, or save the band's future. After a long, silent night, he chose the painful path, letting Pete go. The next day, Phil Collen from the band Girl was brought in. One door closed, another opened, and a new era of Def Leppard began. Joe has rarely spoken about that decision, but those close to him know it left a scar. Pyromania would soon catapult Def Leppard to global fame, yet deep down, Joe always carried Pete's shadow, a reminder that every triumph comes with a loss. When Pete Willis left and Phil Collen joined, Def Leppard entered a new era, dazzling, brutal, and costly. In 1983, Pyromania was born, igniting a fire that had been smoldering for years. It wasn't just an album, it was the moment that lifted them from Sheffield's working-class grit to global superstardom. MTV, the cultural engine of the 1980s, played Photograph, Rock of Ages, and Foolin' on endless rotation, turning Joe Elliott into the face of a new generation of British rock. With over 10 million copies sold in the US alone, Pyromania placed Def Leppard alongside Michael Jackson, Prince, and the pop giants of the era, an unimaginable feat for a heavy metal band from the north of England. Joe Elliott stood under the blinding glare of fame, but it was also the first time he learned its price. During a concert in Tucson, Arizona, caught up in the heat of the moment, he made an offhand remark that deeply offended the Mexican-American community. Greasy Mexicans. It was a careless outburst, yet it echoed louder than any song he'd ever sung. The backlash was immediate: nationwide criticism, boycotts, and threats to cancel shows. Overnight, Def Leppard became the symbol of cultural arrogance. Joe instantly understood this was no longer just about him. Instead of hiding, he faced it head-on. Joe publicly apologized, met with Hispanic community leaders, donated to charities in El Paso, and took full responsibility like a grown man. The controversy eventually subsided, but the scar remained, a lifelong reminder of the weight of words. It was his first and deepest lesson. Sometimes, a single, reckless moment can shatter an empire you've spent half your life building. If the fall in Tucson taught him the cost of fame, then the accident of 1984 taught him the cost of brotherhood. On New Year's Eve, drummer Rick Allen was in a devastating car crash that cost him his left arm. The world assumed it was the end of Def Leppard. A one-armed drummer. It sounded like tragedy itself. But Joe Elliott refused to accept that fate. "We're not replacing Rick," he declared. "We'll wait." In the months that followed, Joe all but lived beside Rick, supporting him emotionally, helping him through recovery, and quietly covering the rehabilitation costs. It was no longer about music, it was about loyalty. When Rick finally returned to the stage in 1986, drumming with a custom electronic kit he could control with his feet, tens of thousands of fans rose to their feet. Joe, standing behind the mic, watched his friend, now with one arm, strike harder than ever. That moment wasn't just Rick's triumph. It was proof of Def Leppard's spirit. They could lose blood, lose people, but never lose faith. And at the center of it all was Joe Elliott, a man who didn't sing for glory, but to keep his band's soul alive. After those dark years that nearly broke them, Def Leppard came back with music distilled from their pain. 3 relentless years, hundreds of studio hours, countless breakdowns, delays, expenses, and tears. That was the journey to Hysteria, 1987. The album that redefined not only their career, but an entire era of mainstream rock. Every drum beat, every guitar chord, every harmony was sharpened to perfection under Mutt Lange's exacting direction and Joe Elliott's near-obsessive determination. When Hysteria finally came out, no one could recognize the band that once rehearsed in a Sheffield warehouse. This wasn't just a rock album, it was an engineering marvel where metal met pop, precision met emotion, and tragedy turned into immortal sound. Animal, Love Bites, Pour Some Sugar on Me, Armageddon It, Rocket. Each track was a hit on its own, yet together they formed a constellation of rebirth. The album ruled the Billboard charts for 6 straight weeks, earned 12X Platinum certification by 1998, and sold over 20 million copies worldwide, a surreal number for any rock band. From being dismissed as lightweights of the NWO-BHM movement, Def Leppard had become global icons. In 1989, they won 2 American Music Awards, Favorite Heavy Metal Hard Rock Artist and Album, an honor few British bands had ever achieved on U.S. soil. Massive stadium tours followed, where tens of thousands sang along with Joe Elliott, the once dismissed average singer who had now become the voice of a generation. But amid the glory came the heaviest blow of all. On January 8, 1991, guitarist Steve Clark, the band's creative soul and Joe's closest friend, died at age 30 from a fatal mix of alcohol and prescription drugs. Clark wasn't just a founding member, he was the heart of Def Leppard's sound. Joe, the man who had held the band together through every storm, fell silent. The unfinished, adrenalized demos still contained Steve's guitar, like an unfinished letter from a friend who would never return. In 1992, Adrenalize was released, mostly recorded before Clark's death. Joe and the band finished what he started, as both a farewell and a resurrection, keeping Steve alive one last time through music. Though lighter in tone than Hysteria, the album still topped the Billboard 200 and helped Def Leppard survive through the grunge revolution. Vivian Campbell, formerly of Dio, joined the tour and soon became a permanent member, not as a replacement for Clark, but as the keeper of his flame. A year later, they returned home. In the summer of 1993, Def Leppard played to over 50,000 fans at Don Valley Stadium in Sheffield, their hometown. Standing before the sea of faces, Joe Elliott knew they had come full circle. From freezing warehouse nights to this moment of triumph under open skies. As he shouted, "Do you want to get rocked?" It wasn't just a line. It was a thank you. To the city that raised them, to the friends they'd lost, and to the years they'd survived together. In the early 1990s, when most of their metal contemporaries had either disbanded or vanished under shifting trends, Joe Elliott kept Def Leppard standing, not through dazzling victories, but through sheer endurance. In 1995, the band set a Guinness World Record by performing on 3 continents within 24 hours: Tangier, Africa, London, Europe, and Vancouver, North America. It wasn't just a feat of stamina. It was a declaration that Def Leppard was still alive, and Joe Elliott was still leading the charge, even as the world around him changed. But from that point on, he began to understand that his role was no longer that of the flag bearer, but the keeper of the flame. The grunge storm from Seattle swept away everything that once gleamed. Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden became the voice of a new era, while Def Leppard were labeled relics of the 80s, too polished, too glossy, too clean. For many, it was the end of the road, but Joe didn't surrender. He chose to evolve, not to chase trends, but to rediscover himself. In 1996, Def Leppard released Slang, their strangest and most introspective album to date. The sound was darker, the lyrics more melancholic, the structure far removed from their signature formulas. Gone were the shining choruses of Hysteria. In their place were sighs, reflections on time, loss, and loneliness. Though it couldn't match the commercial success of their golden years, Slang stood as a testament to courage. The same band that once defined stadium rock was now brave enough to start over. After that painful experiment, Joe chose balance. Euphoria, 1999, marked a return to their classic sound, melodic, radiant, and full of 80s spirit. The lead single Promises proved that Def Leppard could still get U.S. radio spinning their music nearly 2 decades later. 3 years on, X 2002 took a softer pop-rock direction, an attempt to adapt to a changing world. Controversial as it was, Joe stood firm in his belief that music must evolve, not to survive, but to have a reason to exist. From then on, Def Leppard became a symbol of endurance. Yeah, 2006 paid homage to Joe's heroes, Bowie, Queen, and T-Rex, the artists who had taught him how to dream. Songs from the Sparkle Lounge, 2008, and Mirrorball, 2011, felt like chapters of closure. Joe's voice, now lower, raspier, yet carrying the same fire that once filled a cold garage in Sheffield. Behind the scenes, the shadows never disappeared. In 1994, bassist Rick Savage suffered partial facial paralysis from Bell's palsy. Yet he still went on stage, smiling crookedly and playing his heart out as if nothing had happened. Joe and Sav, friends since their teenage years, occasionally clashed quietly over musical direction, but after every silence came reconciliation. They always returned to the studio together, as if every conflict was just destiny testing 2 men who had never learned how to quit. This was the era when Joe Elliott no longer needed to prove his voice or technique. What he proved was character, the ability to stand firm when trends, markets, and even time itself turned against him. He didn't rebel to impress. He led through consistency, friendship, and absolute loyalty to the music that had once saved his soul. And just when the world decided Def Leppard was obsolete, Joe Elliott quietly made it admit, no era can bury a heart that still beats for rock. As the 2010s arrived, Def Leppard, thought to belong to the past, stunned audiences once more. In 2013, they brought Viva, Hysteria to Las Vegas, a residency where they performed the legendary Hysteria album in full each night. Beneath the neon glow of Sin City, Joe Elliott stood before thousands of fans, his voice deeper and rougher but still ablaze. Songs once thought confined to memory came alive again, proving that while time can weather a voice, it cannot extinguish a spirit. 2 years later came Def Leppard 2015, a self-titled album that served as a simple yet powerful statement. We're still here. The music no longer chased trends. It was pure release, a message from men who had lost, fallen, but never surrendered. In 2019, after nearly half a century, Def Leppard were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Joe Elliott, visibly moved, called Rick Savage, his childhood friend from Sheffield, "The only brother I ever had." In that moment, fans understood what truly set Def Leppard apart. Not skill or fame, but friendship. In the rock world, a place of egos and betrayals, they had stayed together for 50 years, bound by trust, loyalty, and music. 3 years later came Diamond Star Halos, 2022, blending the glam rock sparkle of their youth with the wisdom of men who'd grown older. That same year, they returned to the stage for the stadium tour with Motley Crue, a colossal run that grossed over $173 million, with 1.3 million tickets sold. On stage, Joe no longer screamed like in the Pyromania days. He sang slower, lower, but every note carried the weight of a man who had survived everything. And he wasn't done. In 2023, Def Leppard released Drastic Symphonies, a collaboration with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. The fusion of fierce rock and majestic classical tones brought them for the first time onto Billboard's classical charts, a milestone few metal bands could dream of. That same year, Rick Allen, the legendary one-armed drummer, was assaulted outside a Florida hotel. Yet once again, he rose. Fans, fellow musicians, and Joe Elliott rallied around him as if Def Leppard's history were destined to be rewritten again and again through acts of survival born from pain. After years spent roaming the world on tour, Joe Elliott once said the only thing he was missing was a place to come home to. That place appeared in the late 1980s when he met Carla Ramdani, a woman of quiet elegance, intelligence, and composure amid the chaos of rock and roll. She wasn't from the entertainment world, yet she had a calm magnetism that made Joe, a man who lived by the rhythm of drums and stage lights, finally feel at peace. They met at a party in London where Joe had just finished a tour and Carla was working for a fashion magazine. Their first conversation was about music and travel, but somehow they ended up spending the entire night together. Not as a rock star and a model guest, but as two ordinary souls searching for something real in an artificial world. In 1989, they married in a small private ceremony, far from the media's gaze. At the time, Joe was at the height of fame, and Carla became the steady anchor that kept him grounded amid the whirlwind of glory. They divided their lives between Dublin and Los Angeles, where Def Leppard rehearsed and recorded. Carla accompanied Joe on long tours, grew used to his months away, and learned to accept that loving a musician sometimes meant sharing him with millions of others. But their marriage, too, was not immune to cracks. Between grueling schedules, exhaustion, and the pressure of maintaining his image as the unbreakable frontman, Joe gradually drifted away. He loved Carla, yet he also belonged to another world, one where tens of thousands shouted his name every night, and the mornings after were spent in silence inside empty hotel rooms. That silence stretched for years. There was no scandal, no betrayal. Just two people who quietly reached the end of a road and realized they no longer saw the same horizon. Their divorce, after nearly a decade, was discreet and dignified. No bitterness, no public drama, only closure. Joe has rarely spoken about Carla in interviews, but those close to him know she was the one who helped him through the turbulent years after Adrenalize, when Steve Clark's death nearly tore the band apart. For Carla, the marriage, though imperfect, remained a beautiful chapter. She once said she had loved a man who wasn't flawless, but who was real. For Joe, that marriage left a lasting lesson. Fame can make people love you, but only silence and understanding can make love endure. After the end of his first marriage, Joe Elliott lived quietly for years. He kept touring, kept singing, still the soul of Def Leppard. But behind the spotlight, he was a solitary man. No scandals, no tabloid affairs, only music and long, empty spaces. Until he met Christine, the woman who made him believe, after all those years, that love and peace could still exist without the stage. They met in the early 2000s at a small event in Dublin, where Joe had settled down after growing weary of Los Angeles's noise. Christine wasn't part of show business and wasn't dazzled by fame. She was calm, thoughtful, and more interested in Joe the person than Joe Elliott, the rock legend. Her serenity became a healing balm for a man who had lived too long in chaos. They started as friends, then grew closer. Long midnight talks, quiet walks through Phoenix Park, where Joe felt, for the first time, that he no longer needed to be the star. In 2004, they married in a private ceremony in Ireland. No glitz, no celebrity guests, just a few close friends and the soft sound of Def Leppard ballads playing in the background. Afterward, Joe built a restored country home on the outskirts of Dublin, where he could make music and enjoy a quieter life with his new wife. Christine helped him find the balance he'd lost for so long. She never interfered with his music, but she was always there. Not as a fan, but as a confidant. Their life together wasn't without challenges. Joe still toured for months at a time, and Christine, though accustomed to it, sometimes felt lonely. But unlike Carla before her, Christine understood that Joe was inseparable from his music. Instead of holding him back, she supported him, quietly attending shows, standing in the audience like any other fan. That serenity only made Joe treasure her more. In one interview, when asked about happiness, he said simply, "It's peace, and she gave me that." They had a son, Finley, born in 2009, the late-in-life gift Joe never thought he'd have. The boy grew up between two worlds, a father who was a rock legend and a mother who embodied gentleness and grounding. Joe often says that becoming a father at 50 taught him the true meaning of slowing down, that he no longer needed applause, only the sound of his child's laughter. Today, even as Def Leppard continues touring across continents, Joe always comes home, where Christine waits with a warm cup of tea and a quiet smile. No noise, no drama, just a steady, tender love built on years of patience and grace. For a man who spent his life surrounded by the roar of stadiums, perhaps the peaceful silence beside her is the most beautiful song Joe Elliott has ever written. At 66, Joe Elliott shows no sign of slowing down. After nearly half a century on stage, he still performs regularly, not as a man clinging to glory, but as someone who simply cannot live without music. As Def Leppard enters 2025, they aren't making a comeback, because, truthfully, they never left. Joe continues to keep the band's pulse alive through a packed schedule. The Summer Stadium Tour extends into the summer of 2025, featuring special guests like Bret Michaels, The Struts, and Extreme, bringing Def Leppard's music to dozens of cities across North America. Each show proves that though time has roughened his voice, Joe can still leave crowds breathless just by singing. He no longer screams to show power. He sings slower, deeper, each note carrying decades of triumphs and scars, as if every song were a wound retold in sound. Offstage, Joe maintains a close bond with fans through radio. His Joe Elliott show on Planet Rock still airs weekly, where he hand-picks songs, shares behind-the-scenes stories, and reminisces about Bowie, Queen, or young artists he believes still carry the real soul of rock. He also hosts Songs from the Vault on Sirius XM, a personal project where he revisits Def Leppard's journey through music like Letters Sent Home from the Past. In October 2025, Joe surprised fans with an intimate Los Angeles performance, a backyard concert that felt more like a friendly gathering than a commercial gig. No bright lights, no stage pyrotechnics, just Joe, a guitar, and a few hundred people standing close enough to hear him laugh between verses, talking about the years we thought would never come back. Now, while many of his peers have retired, Joe Elliott chooses to stay on stage, not for fame, but because it's where he belongs. At an age when most artists look back, he's still writing the next chapter of his life. Perhaps that's how Joe defines immortality. Not by being carved into the Hall of Fame, but by still singing honestly, even if only one person is listening. Though he never chased wealth, Joe Elliott has become one of the most financially successful voices in British rock. According to Finance Monthly 2025, his net worth is estimated at $75 million, earned from over 4 decades of touring with Def Leppard, whose global album sales exceed 110 million, with hundreds of sold-out shows across 5 continents. His income comes not only from touring, but also from publishing royalties, his Planet Rock radio show, and exclusive Sirius XM projects. He also owns Joe's Garage, a private studio in Dublin where he produces and mixes for younger artists, and holds equity in Def Leppard's remastering and reissue projects, Pyromania, Hysteria, Vault. Unlike many of his rock peers, Joe lives quietly and modestly in Ireland, in a country home surrounded by trees where he resides with his wife, Christine, and their son, Finley. He collects vinyl records and vintage cars, and funds a small charity supporting young musicians in Sheffield, the city where it all began. For Joe, wealth has never been the goal, only the natural result of a lifetime devoted to music. As he once said in an interview, "Money can buy instruments, but not emotion. I still sing because it's the only thing that makes me feel alive." Over nearly 5 decades, Joe Elliott has been more than Def Leppard's voice. He's been its heart, the keeper of a flame that never went out. In a world where most legendary bands collapsed under ego, addiction, or death, Def Leppard endured. And that endurance is Joe's greatest legacy. He didn't turn himself into a legend through scandal or trophies, but through relentless constancy, keeping friends close, keeping the music honest, and keeping his heart untouched by fame. Joe Elliott's legacy isn't measured by sales, though 110 million albums sold would be legacy enough. Nor is it just in the honors, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, American Music Awards, and more. His true value lies in how he lived, loyal to his friends, faithful to his craft, and compassionate toward his pain. When Rick Allen lost his arm, Joe was the first to say, "We'll wait." When Steve Clark died, Joe didn't collapse. He kept singing, as if his voice were the last thread holding the band together. At 66, Joe Elliott stands as a symbol of survival rock. Rock not just for rebellion, but for endurance. He turned pain into art, loss into drive, and music into shared memory for millions. He may not have Freddie Mercury's range or Robert Plant's finesse, but he has something rarer: truth. Every time he sings Love Bites or Hysteria, people don't just hear a song, they hear a life. Looking back, what makes Joe Elliott remarkable isn't that he never fell, but that every time he did, he rose again with nothing but his voice and his will. He has proven that rock never dies, not as long as someone dares to sing it from the heart. Def Leppard will one day grow old, the lights will fade, but Joe's raspy voice will echo somewhere. On radio waves, in memories, or in a rainy night when someone plays "Pour Some Sugar on Me" to remember the fire of youth. Joe Elliott, a man not born to be a legend, yet destined never to be forgotten. a survivor from the ashes of the 20th century, reminding us that true music doesn't need immortality. It only needs belief. And when he smiles through that final round of applause, it isn't goodbye, but a quiet message. We're still alive. If you grew up to the guitars of Hysteria, shouted along to Pour Some Sugar on Me, or ever found yourself in Joe Elliott's gritty, soulful voice, leave him a tribute below. What do you think makes Joe Elliott different from every other rock icon? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories of legends whose fire never fades.